October 29th, 1929. The New York Stock Exchange. A clerk in a gray vest writes a single number on a chalkboard, and the number keeps changing as the morning goes on. By noon, the board is a smear of erased and rewritten figures, because the value of almost everything in America is collapsing in real time. By the close of trading, 16 million shares have changed hands, a record that will stand for decades. In the weeks that follow, banks fail, factories close, and a quarter of the American workforce will lose their jobs. And the question on everyone's lips, from the White House to the breadline, is a simple one. Why doesn't the government just print more money? It is a question that sounds naive, but it is also the most important question in all of economics. The answer begins with a piece of paper that is not money at all. In 1690, the Massachusetts Bay Colony issued the first paper currency in North America. It was a promissory note, a promise to pay the bearer in silver or gold at a future date. That promise worked, because the colony backed the notes with land and future tax revenue. But other colonies watched and learned a different lesson. They learned that printing paper money was easy, and that spending it was even easier. Rhode Island printed so much paper currency that it lost nearly all its value within a decade. Merchants refused to accept it, and courts ordered debts to be paid in gold or goods. By the time of the American Revolution, the Continental Congress made the same mistake on a continental scale. It printed dollars to fund the war, and by 1781, the phrase, "not worth a continental," entered the language. The problem was never the printing press. The problem was trust. Money is not a thing. Money is a shared story about value, and that story only holds when the supply of money grows at roughly the same pace as the supply of goods and services. When a government prints more money without printing more goods, the result is predictable. There are more dollars chasing the same number of loaves of bread, and so the price of bread rises. That is inflation. It is not a mystery, and it is not a political opinion. It is arithmetic. But there is a second, quieter consequence that is even more destructive. Inflation is a hidden tax because it erodes the purchasing power of every dollar already saved. A person who worked for 30 years and saved $100,000 finds that the account is still $100,000, but the bread it can buy is less every year. In this way, printing money is not a way to create wealth. It is a way to redistribute wealth from savers to borrowers, from the prudent to the reckless, and from the poor to the powerful. The most extreme demonstration of this arithmetic happened in Germany after the First World War. In 1919, the German government owed enormous war reparations, and it chose to pay them by printing marks. By 1923, the printing presses at the Reichsbank were running day and night, producing notes in denominations of millions, then billions, then trillions. Workers were paid twice a day, because prices rose faster than a single day's wages could be spent. A loaf of bread that cost 1 mark in 1918 cost 200 billion marks by November 1923. People burned paper money in their stoves, because the money was worth less than the fuel. The German middle class was wiped out, and their savings became wallpaper. And because desperate people will listen to desperate voices, the chaos helped clear the path for a man with a plan and a uniform. The lesson of the Weimar Republic is not that printing money is a bad idea. The lesson is that it is a political catastrophe disguised as a financial one. But there is a crucial distinction, and it is the reason that modern governments do not simply ban the printing press. The distinction is between money that is printed for spending and money that is printed for lending. When a government prints money to pay its own bills, the money goes directly into the economy with nothing behind it, and inflation follows. When a central bank prints money to buy government bonds or to lend to commercial banks, the money is created with an anchor. It is created as a loan, which means it must eventually be repaid with interest, and that interest is the engine that pulls the money back out of circulation. This is the tool that the Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, and the Bank of Japan use in times of crisis. They do not print money for the fun of it. They print money to prevent a collapse, and then they hope to withdraw it later. The 2008 financial crisis was the first great test of this modern system. In September of that year, the investment bank Lehman Brothers collapsed, and the global banking system froze. Banks stopped lending to each other because no one trusted anyone's balance sheet. The Federal Reserve responded by creating trillions of dollars out of thin air, and it used those dollars to buy mortgage-backed securities and government bonds. This was called quantitative easing, a phrase designed to sound boring. The effect was not boring. The money flowed into the banks stabilized, and the economy slowly recovered. Inflation remained low because the banks did not lend the money out all at once. They hoarded it, which is why the policy worked. The Federal Reserve created money, but the banks parked it in reserves, and the money sat there, doing nothing. This is the paradox of modern money. Printing money can be safe, as long as the money does not actually enter circulation too quickly. It is like adding water to a reservoir with the gates closed. The water level rises, but the downstream river stays the same. The pandemic of 2020 was a different test. Governments around the world shut down their economies, and people lost their incomes overnight. Central banks created money again, but this time, governments also sent checks directly to citizens. That money went straight into bank accounts, and then straight into spending. Supply chains were broken, factories were closed, and ships were stuck in ports. So there was more money and fewer goods, and the arithmetic did what it always does. Prices rose. By 2022, inflation in the United States reached 9%, the highest in 40 years. Groceries cost more, gas cost more, and rent cost more. The money was not fake. It was real, and it was chasing real shortages. The response from central banks was to raise interest rates, which is the opposite of printing money. Raising interest rates makes borrowing more expensive, which slows spending, which reduces demand, which brings prices down. It is a painful remedy, but it is the only one that works, because there is no magic machine that can print bread. So the original question, why can't we just print more money, has a layered answer. We can print money, and we do, all the time. But we can only print it without consequences when the economy has spare capacity, when factories are idle, when workers are unemployed, and when goods are piling up unsold. In those moments, new money can help bring the economy back to life. But when the economy is running at full speed, when there are no spare workers and no spare factories, printing money is not a stimulus. It is a tax on everyone who holds cash, and it is a gift to everyone who holds debt. The printing press is a tool, not a solution. It is a medicine that can save a patient in surgery, but it is poison if the patient is healthy. And the hardest part is that the same medicine that saved the economy in 2008 is the same medicine that caused the inflation of 2022. The only difference was timing. This is why economists speak about money with such care. They speak about velocity, about the speed at which money changes hands. They speak about the money supply, about the total amount of currency and deposits in the system. They speak about the output gap, about the difference between what the economy could produce and what it actually produces. But underneath all the jargon is a single insight. Money is a promise, and a promise is only as strong as the person who makes it. If a government prints money to build roads, and the roads generate growth, the promise is kept. If a government prints money to buy votes, and the money buys nothing, the promise is broken. And when a promise is broken enough times, the people stop believing it. They stop holding cash, and they start holding gold, or land, or foreign currency, or anything that is not the government's promise. At that point, the printing press is not just useless. It is the instrument of the government's own downfall. The story of money is the story of trust, and trust is built slowly and destroyed quickly. The continental dollar failed because the new American government had no power to tax. The German mark failed because the Weimar Republic had no power to resist its own creditors. The modern dollar has survived because the United States has the largest economy in the world and the deepest financial markets in history. That is the only reason. It is not the paper, and it is not the ink. It is the belief of a few 100 million people and a few billion more around the world that the promise will be kept. And that belief is maintained by a single discipline, the discipline of not printing too much. It is a discipline that is easy to describe and almost impossible to maintain, because the pressure to print is always greatest exactly when it is most dangerous. It is still the 21st century.